What's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel for Webflow Pros. This is part 2 of our Figma to Webflow tutorial. If you didn't see part 1, I'll leave it in the description of this video. Today we're going to be building out the interactions of this site and making it fully mobile responsive. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Alright, so in the last tutorial I accidentally changed the container top and bottom padding. Let's actually switch that back to 2.7 for top and bottom. That means the nav is going to be a little bit large, so with that container selected we can do is navbar, and then we can maybe just reduce the top and bottom padding to maybe 0.8 or something like that. And that's looking good there. While we're at the nav, let's also go ahead and animate some of these nav menu links. So we'll work on interactions. Just drag a div inside the nav menu, and we'll call this menu underscore line, because this is the line, and then we need to set its parent, the menu link, to position relative. So that way we can absolutely position the line, and we'll do the bottom left corner right here. Let's set its height to 1 pixel. It can be really small. Width to 100%. And let's give it a background color of our main color, and let's go ahead and just copy that line and let's paste it inside each one of these links. What you're noticing is that it's full width of the entire link right there. So what we can do instead is remove this 1.2 EM padding and add it as 1.2 EM margin to separate it like that, and that's pretty much creating the gap we need. And then with the menu line selected, what we can do is also scroll down under transform, and we're going to have it start off to the side. So we're going to move it over this first field, negative 100%, so it's completely over by 100%. And actually, I find sometimes when you do that, you'll see a little bit of the line peeking in, so I do 101%. Just to push it over a little bit further to where we don't see anything peeking in. And then what we'll do is with the menu link selected, set the overflow to hidden, so it just crops that line outside of this container. And then we can create an interaction on hover that slides it in. So with the menu link selected, let's come over to the interaction tab, element trigger. It'll be mouse hover. We'll apply this to the class, and we can only hover on desktop, so we'll uncheck all the others. Create a hover in. This is going to be called nav link in, and what we're going to do is basically grab this line right here, and we're going to come over to the action, create a move action, and set this as an initial state, and it's going to move negative 101%, just like that. So that's how we want it to start, and then we'll create another move over here, and then we're going to move it into view, so that'll just be 0% to move it right into view right there. We'll set our easing to something like out court, so that way it's really just smooth. And then we'll also want to gray out all of the sibling nav links. So what we'll do is grab the menu link right here, and then we'll set its opacity. By default, all of the siblings, it says only siblings with this class are 100%. And then we're going to grab them here and drop them down to 30%. So they'll just be grayed out, and apply the same easing we have here of out court. And then what we can do is actually just sort of duplicate this nav in for the hover out, and then we'll open it up and rename it out. And then we can delete our initial states. We don't need them there. We're going to bring the siblings back to 100% opacity, and then we're going to move them this time. Instead of moving them back to where they started, we want to move them out the opposite way. So instead of negative 101%, it'll just be positive 101%. It'll push them out the other way. You're not seeing it in this preview, but we'll see it when we actually preview the whole site. And then we just need to move it back to where it started, negative 101%. That way this can loop. And this can be a duration of 0. We don't actually need to see it move from one side to the other, but we just need to bring it back to where it started. So then we can save this and preview. Now when we hover in, it grays out the sibling, then line slides in. Then the line slides out the opposite direction whenever we hover out. And that works for every single one of these because we applied it to the class and because each one has a line inside of it. So that's looking great there. For this, for now, I think I'll just do something really simple. We'll create a hover that mainly changes the text color right here, and it'll basically do that. And so that way it doesn't snap to that color, we'll add a transition. We'll apply it to font color, and that's fine there. And if I want this circle div background color to also change, copy the class of this circle here. If I want it to also change, come over to the custom code section, embed on my page, and then do a period, paste the class name, and then we're gonna set the background color right here to the current color. That just means the color, the font color of the parent. And now when I hover over that, the circle color is changing also. Next, let's set a hover state for this button. So we have this button here called main button. Whenever we hover over it, we just want a circle to sort of fill up the background color. We can drag a div inside and give it a class of main button circle. And then we're going to need to absolutely position the circle to its parent. So the way we're going to do that is set the parent to relative, and then the circle right here will be position absolute. We're going to anchor it to the full top right here. Its width is going to be 100%, but this button may grow in width depending on which section we put it in or how much text is inside. So we need to calculate the height dynamically, and we'll do that by putting top padding of 100%, and that's going to make it a perfect square inside this button. And then we can set the background color to our main color. We can set the radius to 100 viewport width to perfectly round it. And then what we can do with the main button selected is set the overflow to hidden. It's just going to crop this circle inside. And what we can do is actually apply a transform that moves it up negative 100%. So it's just going to start right there at the end of the circle. It'll start out of view. Whenever we hover on, we want it to basically slide underneath this text. So that means this main button circle right here is going to need a z-index of at least 1. And then this text right here, we can give it a class of main button p for paragraph. And we'll need to set its position to relative actually, and it'll be a z-index of 2, so it's above the circle. And then what we can do with the main button selected is create a element trigger, mouse hover, apply to the class only on desktop, and then we'll create on hover will be button in. And then what we want to do is basically grab the circle right here, and then we're going to go through the same process, set its move to negative 100%. For this field, so we're pushing it off to the top. That's an initial state, and then we want to move it down, maybe 40. Let's try 40%. Maybe, let's see. So we can do negative 40%. That means the circle pretty much covers the whole button right there. And then we'll also want to change the font color of the main button. So by default, the text color is this main color, and then we want to change the text color right here to this dark color here. If we preview that, it just slides in and fills up. We can even set some sort of easing. Maybe let's try outcourt. Yeah, that looks good. And then that is pretty much all we need for the hover in. So let's just create another one, and then we'll duplicate the button in, select it, and then we'll rename it to say out. And then we'll delete our initial states. And then this time we want the button to move the opposite way. So it'll be positive 100%. That way it just pushes it down completely out of view of this circle. And we'll want the text color to change back to our main color. And then we need to bring the circle back to where it started. So move will be negative 100%. And then duration will be 0. That way when we hover in again, it still works. And that's applied to the class. So let's go ahead and preview this and see how it looks. We got that hover in, hover out, it's filling in, filling out, and that's looking good. So let's go ahead and publish it. Now in Safari, what you'll notice, even though we have the overflow set to hidden, because the parent has a border radius, we're seeing sort of a square shape. It's not being perfectly masked or cropped inside of that parent shape. So we can fix this with a little bit of custom code. If you head over to my public code collection, you'll see one of the links is for Safari to inherit border radius. It's just this little bit of code right here that's going to make sure that mask stays in place on our class of main button. So we'll basically go over to our embed, open that up, and then we'll paste this in here and give it the class of main-button, and then just save and publish. And then back on the main site, you'll notice that the shape is being masked inside the parent. All right, let's go ahead and animate this circle here. We're going to drop a combo class of isLink on it, and then we're just going to set up a simple hover interaction that's basically just going to add a transform here, and we're going to scale it down, maybe something like 0.9, and then we can change its background color. And then back on the main class, we're going to add a little bit of a transition. That way it just scales down instead of snapping, and that looks good there. For this section here, we can create while scrolling interaction on this merge class here. We'll create an element trigger while scrolling into view applied to the class, and since it's scroll, it can happen on all breakpoints. We'll start an animation and call this merge images, and then we can start by selecting this larger image grid item here. We can move, and maybe we'll move it down by 6 EM, so it just pushes it down, and then over here we'll pull it up -6 EM. And then we'll go over to this image here. Since it appears to be closer to us, it needs to move a little bit faster. So we'll just increase the distance. This time we'll push it down by maybe 10 EM. And then we need to make sure all this content's on a higher Z index, so that way it's on top of that. And then over here, we'll pull it up -10 EM. And then this image here, just to create even more depth, we'll have it going the opposite direction. So it'll start out negative, and maybe we do -8 EM, and then over here it'll actually go to the positive 8 EM. And then when we preview that, what we should see, is this one's moving opposite, and then these two images are moving at different speeds. And then we can save this and increase our smoothing, maybe something like 80%, so it feels a little bit nicer. And then I'll select this entire grid right here, which is merge column, the first one, set its position to relative, Z index to 2, and that should put it on top. I'll just give this one a Z index of 1, should put it on top of this one. Here I think we're going to leave as is for now, and then this one we want to move that text whenever we're scrolling over this grid as resources. So let's create an element trigger. Again, it's a while scroll into view applied to the class all breakpoints, and what we're going to do is actually call this resources section, and we are going to select this entire resource text, the first one, and we basically want to move it. Maybe we'll move it 24 EM, so that's basically going to push it to where this first word is just barely getting cut off. You'll see when I apply a move here, it removes my rotate, so I'm going to have to add that back on. But we'll move it over here, -24 EM, the opposite direction, to where the end of this is being cut off. And then we can apply our rotate, which I believe was this last field, of -2.5. And then we need to apply another one here, and it's just going to do the exact same thing, -2.5 degrees. And then we can do this one here. This first one was +24, so we'll just do the opposite to make this go the opposite direction. It would actually be -24 EM, and then it will move over here to +24 EM. And then we need to apply the same rotate, so we're going to apply this rotate of -2.5 degrees, and then over here exact same rotate, -2.5 degrees. And then let's preview this, so they should move opposite directions. And whenever we scroll into view, that is perfect, they're moving opposite directions. And let's add a bit of smoothing to this, and that looks great there. For this next one, whenever we hover over one of these social icons, I think we'll basically make the border radius full transparency, and maybe scale it down, maybe scale the icon up. So let's just save this transparency as a swatch. I'll call it transparent, and then we'll just save that. And we're going to create a hover on the entire social link, so this parent link block right here. Element trigger, mouse hover, applied to the class. This would only happen on desktop. On hover, we would call this social in. And basically what we're going to do is grab this social circle, and we're going to animate basically its border color, set this as an initial state to the transparent value, and then the border color will change here. We're going to set to full opacity. And then we'll also do basically we're going to add another one that's going to scale it down. So by default it's going to be 1, and then here we're going to scale to maybe 0.9 or something like that. And then that pushed the link block, the social icon, down. So we're actually going to set a scale to 1 here, and then this time we're going to set a scale that scales it up like this. And then let's set some sort of easing on these, maybe outport, and let's preview how that looks right there. Yeah, so it's just basically that circle shrinking around the social icon whenever we hover, and then we can create our hover out and duplicate the one we have, and instead of social in, we'll call this social out, and then we'll delete all our initial states, and we need to change everything back to the way it was. So this is transparent, this would be a scale of 1, and this one would be a scale of 1 as well, and then we can save that and we're good there. And let's just preview. So when we come over to this section, we hover over each one of these, and the circle basically just scales down around it, and that's looking great. Lastly, we can go ahead and set up mobile responsiveness. So what we can do, we'll set up the hamburger icon first if we open up our nav. So we have our whole nav, the grid, and then there's these grid items. This one's the logo, this one is the menu, and then we can add maybe another div inside there. And then this could be underneath the menu, and we'll give this a class of grid item as well. And then we're gonna add a class of is hamburger to this. So this will be our hamburger icon. And inside that grid item, maybe its width can be, we'll leave its width at 100% for now. Inside that grid item, we want to drag in this Lottie icon that I have here. So we'll just plug that in here, and then this can be called hamburger, since that's the name of our component, underscore icon, since it's an element inside. Maybe its width is something like 2em or 3em. Yeah, let's go 3em for now. And then we're going to grab this entire grid item, its parent, and we're going to actually make this a link block because it's clickable. And we're going to set this to display none. We don't need to see it at all on desktop. And then we can go over into mobile. So in mobile view right now, what we have is the body font size is changing. Before it was 1 viewport width. So if you see what it was on desktop, things are just getting way too small. And especially when we come down here to mobile view, it's almost impossible to read. So we had to change the font size on tablet and below. And then what I usually recommend for this is actually just setting a pixel font size. So maybe the font size could be something like 12 pixels, 14, whatever. And what you'll notice is when I increase the font size of the body right here on the body all pages tag, every element inside is growing or shrinking in size because it's all based on the body. So when we set the body to pixels, then everything's just going to start wrapping. You'll see nothing is really scaling. And usually I would just come over to the heading, set the headings, maybe the larger ones to viewport width, the paddings inside our containers and grid items to viewport width on the left and right. That way those just sort of scale. But in this example, because so many items are wrapped and applied specifically to the grid, I think that we'll have to set more elements to viewport width than we'll have to set to pixels. So I'm actually going to do something a little different in this example and actually just set the body font size to 1.5 viewport width. So it's a little bit larger than desktop, but still things are kind of scaling. And then the elements that we don't want to scale, we'll just override by setting to pixels. So paragraph would be a good example of that. I'll go to the paragraph, all paragraphs tag, set the font size to 12 pixels. Since this is sort of some micro copy there, and then that stuff won't scale. Another thing that I won't want to scale is the space in between our containers, the padding top and bottom, because that can get really microscopic, and I want to keep a good bit of space in between those containers. Right now it's 2.7 em. What I usually do is just set that maybe 27 pixels, just switch it to what's pretty close to the pixel equivalent of the em value. So that way it'll just stop scaling there. And then we can come adjust some things that we need to adjust, like maybe this heading. We just reduce the font size in EMs a little bit to get it to align all in one line right there. And that's looking okay for that part. We're going to set this grid item of is menu to display none. And then we're going to set the grid item of the hamburger to display block. And then we'll set its width to auto. And then we'll also set this grid item, the nav logo, this width on this one can be auto as well. That way it's based off the elements inside of it. And let's also set this grid item to flex and center up the logo inside, so it's aligned from top to bottom. And then with this grid selected, we'll add a combo class of is nav. and then use that to flex these items apart. And that's looking pretty good. These are going to scale down and they're going to get too small, like especially here. So usually if there's an element I don't want to scale, I'll just go ahead and set it to pixels right from the start. So I can do that by, with this logo image selected here, can just set that to maybe 52 pixels would be pretty close to what we have. And then this hamburger, maybe 30 pixels. So something like that. And then the paddings will still scale inside that element, but the elements themselves will have a max size sort of applied there. And that's looking great all the way down. This is all I think fine for now. This we need to change, so we'll probably need to wrap these banner items. We'll set their width to 100%, and then we need, with their parent selected, we need to change the flex direction to basically center them up, and maybe just center it like this. And then here we're going to need to we'll add combo class is first. That way we can basically add a bit of bottom margin to pull these apart like that. And then these two aren't completely aligning. That's because this is being stretched because it's in a flex box. It's being swished. So we'll just set it not to shrink. And now those two paragraph text are aligning with each other. Here we can actually reduce a bit of the padding. So maybe we'll do something like this, 2.84. And then we'll apply the exact same padding to the second grid item here. And that's looking pretty good. I may even apply Flexbox to center up this inside the container. And then here we're just going to need to switch this width to 100% width. And then let's see, we'll also want to grab the parent of this 100% width item, which is the merch, and basically switch the flex direction so they stack one underneath the other. And then this one here will also be 100% width. And then we may increase the height of this image. We're going to set the height using EMs. Before it was 100% of the column next to it, but now there is no column next to it, so we need to set a height here. And when we're setting the height in EMs like this, that means the height is actually just going to scale up and down with the width of the browser. And then this merch item here, maybe we do -40 on this side, and then here we can do negative. We don't need a negative margin. We can just set this side to 0, and then we can increase the height of this image. So I'm still trying to keep things pretty closely aligned to the grid. That way when we scale up and down, it's like staying within a certain alignment. But yeah, that's looking pretty good here. I may increase the width of this item. It was 40, when we do 60, so it'll be 6 columns. And then these right here, their parent width, which was the grid item here, maybe we'll switch it to 15, so they're a little bit larger. They can still scale up and down, but that's looking good there. And then we need to go ahead and set basically our menu. So our menu right now, we had it set to display none, but we're going to need to be able to hide and show it. So that would be, if we open up our grid, that would be the second grid item here. Let's just grab that menu and set it to display block for now so we can see it. We'll set its position to absolute to the top, and we'll set its width to 100% of the parent. And we can also maybe give it a background color so it's a little bit easier to see. And let's go ahead and give it a set height. Well, no, actually we won't do a set height in this case. Let's increase the padding inside this, and I'm actually going to set that padding using pixels because, see, it's starting to get a little too close to this icon. These icons are pixels, so we want this padding to also be set using pixels. That way it doesn't shrink underneath those. And then we also need to put it behind the nav menu, so we'll give it a negative z index, -1. That way it's behind these, and that's looking good there. This one, this menu button right now still has Flexbox applied. So with the entire grid item, let's just flex everything to vertical so they stack under each other. Let's flex everything to the center. And then let's get this menu link button, and let's remove that auto margin to just 0 so it centers it up. And let's add a bit of padding. I'll actually set pixels here because I don't want this size to scale down. And then the paddings on the side, I'm just going to align it up here. That can still be EMs because I want those side paddings to scale up and down. And then all this is set using pixels from the link block. What we can do is we have this paragraph text set to 12 pixels because it's our all paragraphs font size. We may want to increase that size a little bit, so we can call it nav, what did we call these? The parent of these were called menu link. So we'll apply a class to these and call this menu P, and that'll go on each one of these links. That way we can increase the size of these, because we will probably want them to be a little bit larger than our average paragraph text size on mobile. So we're just going to apply combo classes to each one of these, and then we'll increase their font size, maybe something like 20 pixels, doesn't have to be that large. And then this one here, we'll kind of do the same thing. So we can add that menu P tag right here to increase the font size. This component here, instead of changing its width, height, margin, and the width of the icon inside, because all of that is set to EMs right now, what we can do just with the whole circle selected is increase the font size of the parent using EMs, and you'll notice that the margin, the width, the height, and the icon size all scales up in size with that parent. So if we do 1.3, that's going to look good there. And then with the menu link selected, let's also add just a bit of top and bottom padding, so that way it kind of spaces these out and increases the clickable area a little bit. I may even add some side padding, and I'm going to remove this side margin so that way it stays centered. And then this menu button here, we'll add a bit of top margin to separate it from the others. So this entire menu is pretty much set up now, and it scales all the way down. We do have a bit of wrapping because this isn't a flex, set to no wrap. Let's see if it's still shrinking that icon. It is, because there's just not enough space for these. So on this breakpoint, where did it start shrinking? Kind of on this breakpoint, we may just switch the flex, and then we'll do like this, so that way the icon is on top, and then the icon is scaling down because the font size is EMs, and the EMs is based on viewport width, so it's scaling up and down. Let's actually just set the font size using pixels to this component here, and then it should now sort of just lock in place, and that'll solve this problem here as well. When it starts to stack, which I think we stacked it here, we'll set the side margin to 0, and we'll put a bit of bottom margin right here, and that is looking good. So we have this stacked and separate it. And one other thing I may do is increase the padding right here and add a bottom border of 1 pixel with our font color to this menu, so that way we have a clear separation where the menu is. Let's set the menu to display none, and then let's set up our interaction. So it's on click of this grid item, we'll head over to the interactions panel, mouse click, apply to the class. This won't happen on desktop, so we'll uncheck desktop, and let's go ahead and create a we'll call this nav menu. And what we want to do is select the entire menu, which was this grid item here, and then we're going to set its initial state to display none by default, so we're not seeing it. And then we'll change it to flex, so that way it flexes those inside. And then from there, we can also maybe animate it a little bit. So maybe we move it negative 100% on the initial state. And then here we move it down 0% like this. So it's just going to slide from the bottom. And then we can apply maybe an outquart easing to really speed it up. That looks great. And then we can also animate this Lottie. So right now we'll just start the Lottie at 0%. And then we'll bring the Lottie up, in this case, all the way to, it looks like about the 52% mark. So we play that. That's what's happening for our menu, and that looks great. And then we'll also create another animation. We'll duplicate the nav menu, and then we'll create one called nav menu close. And then here we're just going to delete all these initial states. We're going to move the hide show till after all the animations happen and set it back to display none, so it hides it. And then the Lottie we're going to bring back to 0, and the move we're going to bring back to negative 100%. And we can save this, and we're good there. Let's go ahead and preview. So we click, it opens, click again, and it closes. It's just sliding in and out, just like that. So our menu's good. It's fully responsive and working across all breakpoints. Let's go ahead and go through the rest of the page. So this section is looking great to me. This section in and out looks great. Here we're good. I think we're good on all of these sections. So let's jump down to the next breakpoint. And right here, what I really want to do is probably change the width of some of these columns. So this grid item here, I'm actually going to remove this margin, set it to 0, and then I'll set its width to 50% of the parent. And then this hero photo I'll set to 50% as well. So those two are just stacking side by side. And then this grid item down here at the bottom, we're just going to set to 100% width. And then we'll probably increase the height of this image a little so it's not cropped so tight. And then that looks good there. This is all looking good here. And then in this section, I think we're still okay. This text is starting to get a little small. So what I'll do is go to the all H6 headings tag here and convert it to pixels, maybe something like 15 pixels or 14. And then that looks good. It's just going to start wrapping instead. This is all good here. One thing I may do with these grid items is I'll make them a little taller for now. So we'll just go over to the height, just increase the height a little bit, and that's scaling in and out. I may want a little bit of padding separating this. So with this merge column 2, I'll just create a little bit of padding here, and that's going to separate that there. I may even reduce the padding here a little bit, and maybe increase the font size of this H3 heading to where it's a bit larger, something like that. And then that looks good there. Here I may start to increase the height a little bit of this image. And then if I want to increase the height of the text inside, all I had to do, not even grab the text or the logo, but grab the card content and set the height to 1 EM, which is since the body font size is set to 1.5 viewport width, 1 EM would be the equivalent. And then I would just start increasing that font size, and you'll notice that the width of the logo grows, the margin grows, and the width of this text. So everything's based on the font size of the parent. So now when I scale that in and out, what you'll notice is that is all growing as well there. This still looks good here. That looks good to me there. And then over here, I'm going to change some things. This top padding will be in pixels, so that way we're just keeping that separation, and that's not going to shrink or grow. The size of this heading here, I'm actually going to increase the font size a bit, and I'm going to stack it on 2 lines like that. And then this descender here in the text is cutting off, so we can add a little bit of padding to this to make sure the descenders don't stake out because of our line height. So maybe at 0.2 EM padding there. That's all looking good. I may stack these grid items, so maybe this is a width of 100%, and maybe this one can have a width of 100% here, and then maybe we increase the height on this image. Maybe it can be pretty tall. And these right now are getting a little bit too small, these circles here. So what I can do with this hero circle selected is set the font size to pixels. And this one has a combo class. Let me remove that combo class of isLink for a second, so that way it affects both of them. Set the font size to pixels, and then I'll add that combo class back on. And now these are locking in place at a certain size. They're not just going to scale infinitely. I can do the same with the button. Maybe set its font size to 12 pixels, and then it'll lock into a certain size and stop scaling. This 3 bottom margin I'm using, or 3 bottom padding I'm using somewhere else as well. Set that to 30 pixels, so that way that stays locked in and scaling. And then this hero album, I'll just increase, create a little bit of padding now that we stack them. I want these to be spaced apart, and may even increase the height of this even more. That's looking good there. And then in this section, maybe instead of 30 we do 20 for these two. Yeah, that looks good. And then for this image here, I may create a little bit of bottom margin to separate those out. That looks good there. Here, things are really out of whack. So the smallest version here, it was still working. But here we're going to need to start stacking things. So we'll do 100%. And then here on this grid item, we'll do 100% as well. And then we'll also set the pixel font size, maybe 12 pixels or maybe 6 pixels, 7 on these icons, so that way they just maintain a certain size and don't get too small. And then we can even set pixel paddings top and bottom in this container to basically create a bit of separation there. That's all working. Here things are getting way too small, so I may go ahead and set the width of these items. Let's try 50%. Yeah, that looks pretty good there. And we could leave it stacked like that, honestly, or I may stack them side by side by grabbing the merge link and switching this horizontal distribute apart, adding a little bit of padding here. You'll notice my H5 is getting a bit too small. I'm going to leave it scaling with viewport width though, so we'll leave it set to EMs and just increase the font size a bit. That way it can scale up and down. Whenever we drag this out, it's going to keep scaling for us and stay inside. This is all good there. May increase the height of this photo a bit because it is a tiny bit small. And then I may increase the padding here on this photo to make it more of a vertical like that. Looks good there. And this I think is still looking fine. These get a little small, especially when we go down to the smallest version here. So what we could do is set the width on their parent to make them all maybe 20% of the parent, or maybe we go, what would 30 look like? 30 doesn't look so bad either, so they're all just stacking like that, one underneath the other. And then these social icons inside will want to be larger, so instead of changing both their width and height to pixels, we'll just grab their parent, which is the whole hero circle, set a font size in pixels, and now they're just going to stay. Actually, I may set that font size back to EMs because I want them to scale down with the social circles. So maybe 2 EMs, and then now they're just kind of scaling like that. And I may even add a bit more padding inside this, maybe 12 pixels to space this apart a bit. Which one is this? This is our H4 heading, which we're also using up here, and it's getting the difference. The difference here isn't really working for us, so let's increase the font size a bit so that way we have more contrast, and that is going to look good there. We're good here. I may set the width in this to 11 pixels so it doesn't scale down and get too small. Let's see how that looks. Or maybe instead of pixels we leave it EMs so it keeps to scale. 2 EMs though, so that way it gets a bit wider. And that looks great there. Looks great here and on all our breakpoints. So let's go ahead and just preview and test it all out. We preview, we can open our menu, close it. We have our layouts all done here. That's looking good. We have all of our links here. May increase the side padding in this a little bit more and make sure when we scale down it still looks fine. Yeah, maybe a little less because of the word shirts is a little long. That's looking good there. And this section is all good. We still have our sort of scroll interaction on those images. You'll see they're moving at different speeds apart from each other. And we still have this because we're using EMs and we just increased the parent font size with EMs. These words should still fall in the exact same place on that interaction. And all these look good here. And that's the site. It's fully responsive from desktop on down. We have a fully functioning mobile site with some nice interactions, desktop, tablet, all the way through.
If you've enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button below, and I'll catch you in the next video. Goodbye.